All right, and here we are, volume two,
Two.
of Northanger Abbey.
Yeah.
I believe the penultimate episode of the entire Jane Austen project, assuming that we're going to come back and talk about the critical material.
Yeah, there's good critical material in here. In fact, one of the things I liked about the editing was the attention calling to an article that I definitely want to read when we get to that part. She referenced, I guess it's a she, yeah, Susan Fryman, a couple of different times referenced, I guess it's the Robert Hopkins article.
Yeah.
General
yeah.
Tilney and Affairs of State, implying that his is an interesting class engagement with the novel.
Right.
Like that part where Tilney's bragging about all his hothouses.
Right.
And the editor's like, oh, see this part of the essay. So I'm looking forward to reading it. It's because so many people were hungry and couldn't get food in the 1790s or 1810s whenever this was set.
Right, and he's complaining about his pineapple only producing 300.
Which, by the way, like I didn't know they even grew pineapple in Britain because my wife and son just got back from Costa Rica this past summer, and I know that is... like, that's a big export for them.
Well, I suspect that they didn't...
they make it sound like they grow it there, though.
Well, but I suspect they didn't in any kind of large scale, right?
Yeah.
And this was just enough for the family,
Yeah.
and there must have been only a very small number of families wealthy enough to do something.
I mean,
like
just
that.
based on the tour they got, and also just reason when you Google around, it seems like, that is one of the more climate-sensitive fruits, and one doesn't imagine England being a big producer of it.
Hence the hothouse.
But the hothouse makes it possible, yes.
Right. But I think the horticulture and the picturesque certainly a big part of this.
But it's full circle back to Sense and Sensibility, right?
Right, and a little
the
bit
fascination with cottages,
and a little bit Mansfield, right, with the improvements. But I think the real king of Volume 2 is the Gothic.
Yeah, and I guess we have some disappointment we want to talk about.
I mean,
let's start with that.
Should we lead with
Let's lead with disappointments that we might have felt by how Northanger ended.
Well, you start us off, and then I'll jump in.
Well, my favorite part of Volume 2 was the characterization of Henry. Once again, dialogue is king for Jane Austen, and like when she's worrying about Frederick hitting on Isabella, and Henry's like, men don't mind it when other men admire their women. It's when the women admire back. And it's just like he's always telling her to chill out, like, and he's like, listen, like, because you read all these novels and you start getting caught up in how everything's a scandal not to be come back from. And sure, Henry's privileged. He comes from wealth. But he also, I think, represents a little bit of sense. He's like, listen, if it doesn't work out between them, it's just better for them, like your brother and Isabella. Like, like it's going to suck in the short term, but it's not like anything's ruined. Like, let's not jump off a bridge here. And in general, he's very playful with her in ways that feel like modern flirting, including the over-the-top presagement of the stuff she's going to encounter in the Abbey. And he tells her the story. She's eating it up. She's like, oh, that won't happen to me, but tell me more. And it's like, this is still how flirting can kind of work sometimes. And
I agree.
But I guess where the disappointment comes in is, well, in the end, there's nothing really unique about Northanger Abbey except for, once again, we have a money-grubbing jerk running the show who's not going to be able to stop the young lovers from being in love. And it all just came down to money and position and prestige. And it's like, well, we got that with the other 5 novels too. So I just didn't really feel like we were as gothic as we could have been.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Although I don't object to that as much.
Okay.
I didn't really expect a mad monk to just appear.
Well, me neither. But I thought there would be more to the house. Given all the hat tipping to Catherine
Moreland.
No, the gosh, Radcliffe.
Oh yeah,
Anne Radcliffe.
and yeah.
With all the hat tipping to her, I thought there'd be something weird about the house, other than just the guy's like a selfish schemer.
Well, here's what I think is happening with that, right? I think so. I have this thing. I think I've talked to you about this before. I have this theory that music about music is great.
Yeah.
Right. My go-to example of this is Sultans of Swing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You just can't go wrong with a song about music.
Right.
But books about books, not so much.
Often not.
And I feel like Northanger is a book about books.
Mm.
And so, all of this kind of hat tipping to the Gothic, especially, I mean Henry's section here on 118 where he's
probably I was talking about,
he's
right?
teasing Catherine.
Yeah, and I mean it's like it just reminds me of there's such a fresh energy of a young man using his imagination to please the young woman. And it just feels like authentic flirting, and I love
it's 108.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I love when Austen can pull off authentic dialogue so smoothly.
Yeah. How fearfully will you examine the furniture of your apartment, and what will you discern? Not tables, toilets, wardrobes, or drawers, but on one side perhaps the remains of a broken lute, on the other a ponderous chest which no effort can open. Right? I mean, it's just this kind of classic thing.
Yeah.
But here's
she just plays her role so perfectly. She's like, oh, Mr. Tilney, how frightful. This is just like a book, to your point.
Right.
But it cannot really happen to me. I'm sure your housekeeper's not really Dorothy. But then that dash, well, what then? Right? Like she wants more.
And, and it's this great game. And it's not, I mean, I am not, I grew up in a world, for instance, where it was sort of a given that first dates were horror movies. And in part because, you wished very much that the girl would be startled and grab you, right?
Do you ever think that first dates are a great example of books about books? Because that's one of the lead combos that happen on a first date is like, well, we're on a first date.
Yeah.
And then people talk about how, isn't it kind of awkward that we're on a
sort of
first
self-awareness,
date?
Yeah. It's kind of Seinfeldian.
Yes.
Maybe so. It's, to be honest, it's so long since I've done something like that, I couldn't tell you at this point. But I think that there's certainly some things there. But as much as I find this charming, I find that some of the shine dulls for me because of the way that I understand this to be part of this broader apparatus, which is Jane Austen talking about Gothic novels and the readers of Gothic novels. And that what this is a sort of nod to the literati who are thinking about things like genre and plot device and all of that kind of English professory stuff, and along the way, the plot kind of like falls into service of this kind of theoretical sort of positioning about the Gothic as an art form or whatever. And I find that things like this often to me feel like inside jokes with all of the kind of liabilities that come with that. And
there are times where she does stuff that like it's annoying in the same way that voiceovers in a movie are annoying. Like I love the intrusive narrator sometimes, but not when you're just explaining stuff. I don't know, like on page 137. This is just like from what you're saying. It's almost like Jane Austen's using this moment I'm going to read to be like, hey guys, like in case anybody was confused, Radcliffe's stuff is fiction, life isn't like that. It's like, well, no shit. On 137, she saw that infatuation had been created. The mischief settled long before quitting Bath, and it seemed as if the hall might be traced to the influence of that sort of reading which she had there indulged. Charming as were all of Mrs. Radcliffe's works, and charming even as were the works of all her imitators, it was not in them perhaps that human nature, at least in the Midland counties of England, were to be looked for. And I mean, I get it. She starts like parsing nations and saying maybe other nations are more Gothic, but I just felt like how unnecessary. Like, I would actually be more charmed if you just showed Catherine and her foibles without explaining the fucking foibles,
And then, as we get kind of into the 160s, 170s, really close to the end, the narrator becomes more intrusive and starting to say things like, well, I'm going to have to compress things here, and move us along, and then talk about the
Just
rules.
trust me, everybody was happy to
The
see her.
rules of composition demand this or that, and so I find myself partly feeling like Austen is signaling a certain boredom.
Like we're in a hurry, something.
Yeah. At the same time, that I feel like the book has stopped being about the things that I really like about Jane Austen, which are these kind of like fully formed characters with complex sort of emotional motivations, these kind of interesting social circumstances between real people, and I feel like she's kind of stripped all that out and been like, so this is a story, yada yada yada,
And what do you think? Maybe here we can sort of make a turn to the things we thought were more interesting now that we've gotten that out of our system. Although we might not, we might have more complaining to do. But there's a passage towards the end, I think it's maybe even on the third to last page or second, where she's like, you know what, like, yeah, the father threw up some roadblocks, and yeah, Isabella this, but like, look, Henry's 26, she's 18, little bit of friction's good for everybody. And I got to thinking about that. What would you say? I mean, I know we've encountered young heroines before, but in a way, I think I like my Austen better when the heroines got more scars. Like, in a way, I prefer Persuasion still to all the books, because Anne, I mean, part of the point of the novel was that Anne had grounded herself, even though she was wrong about why the guy left, and, she's constantly wrong, so it's not like she's 27 and right about stuff. But she's old enough to where she's able to sort of back up what Emma had been saying when Emma was like, oh, I can just do it by myself. But Anne kind of was.
Yeah.
What do you think about going back to the model of, okay, she's 18, so she's read a lot of books and she's fanciful. I mean, in some ways, is that kind of, to you, make these kind of plot devices more okay, and this kind of rapidity? Like, she's not the seasoned warrior that Anne was, or that even Elizabeth was.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to that, but I also find that one of the things that this seems to really be hinting at is a kind of superficiality. I mean, in ways that's very typical of Austen, and that in some of the books I like a lot better than in this book. What this is really about are those social constraints paired with the kind of bad actors and kind of like malicious misinformation that lead to kind of what I think of as classic Austen misunderstandings. Right, and there's the thing with Isabella and the two suitors. First
once
of all,
again, the naughty siblings,
right?
Too, because there's the Thorpes are both bad news in different ways,
right?
There's a little harken back to Mansfield there.
Yeah, and then there's the general's misunderstanding, kind of by way of Thorpe. Of
how much she was worth.
What
Thorpe misrepresented it twice.
Right.
Once he made her seem too rich, once too poor.
Yeah. Right.
In a way, it's like, but you still don't feel sorry for the general, because the fact that you care this much at all is what makes you a jerk.
Well, and that he's so just kind of wildly thing. But I think but kind of underneath all that, the thread that really ties this all together is that Catherine has this kind of like ecosystem of female friends with whom she practices this very sort of like superficial kind of tenuous connection to the world, that is mostly about talking about stories. It's mostly sort of frivolous, and in a way, while I think her heart is good, I think one of the things that I'm left feeling, I'm not sure because the book wants me to, is that ultimately Catherine is a little bit just a lightweight. She's not Anne.
Well, I mean, do you think it also is influenced by the fact that, unlike Anne, who had a dandy as a father who wasn't nice, so this is a second father in a row where fathers are now really the bad guys, and then okay, Catherine's got doting parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, their only mistake is that maybe sometimes they don't take their daughter's suffering seriously enough, which, like, all parents do. Like, kids break up and parents are like, oh, you'll get over it, it'll be fine. It was good for you to get on that carriage. And
Right.
but in a way, it's like what your mom probably would have said to you when you were 18, if something had happened. Be like, oh, you made it back. Good job, Chris. Like, hey, I don't like what he did, but let's not act like... And then even when, the narrator's like, oh, they're not even surprised she's getting married because everybody loves Catherine. Mm-hmm. And then the Allens, while not flawless, like, Catherine has that network of love. Mm-hmm. She's never not been loved. So her great sadness is that she's bored. Like, this is why she wanted to get a bath, and she continues to get what she wants all the time. There's a brief period where she doesn't get what she wants, and that's where the trouble is. Mm-hmm. And then, bam, Henry comes back and says, oh, here's everything you want. So is lightweight another way of saying she's spoiled? Like, she's less interesting to us because she already had everything? I mean,
Emma feels spoiled to me.
But Emma has that imaginative gravity. She's, like, engaged in the whole community.
Right, right. But she also is engaged on her own terms.
It's true.
I think Catherine is nice.
Yeah.
I think Catherine is genuinely kind.
She is.
But she
I like Catherine.
But she just comes off to me as mildly superficial. I mean, she's...
What would you say is the most interesting thing about Catherine to Jane Austen? Would you say it is her love of reading novels?
I think Catherine is a stand-in for readership, yes. And because of that, she doesn't get the opportunity to grow into a person... Like, for instance, we know she reads a lot, right? But she never seems to think about what she reads, right? We know that she...
It's like the narrator thinks about it more than the character does.
We know that she has memorized the sort of conventions. Mm-hmm. She knows that an abbey is supposed to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? But she hasn't gotten beyond just this kind of laundry list of cliches.
Which is why she is hit with disappointment. Because if what you're trading in is the most romantic notion, you're not going to enjoy the thing for what it is. Maybe.
Right.
Maybe that's part of it.
Well, that is part of it. And it's also just this kind of, I don't know, I mean, this is maybe a dangerous thing to say, but what it reminds me of a bit are those students that I encounter from time to time who will come into my class, just ready to rock and talking about how much they like reading. Mm-hmm. And then no matter what I give them, they're like, meh. And then I ask them, well, but I don't understand. 3 weeks ago you told me you really liked reading. And then they tell me what they like reading, and it's basically like one thing.
Right.
One book they liked a lot once.
To which they return often.
Yeah. And And I don't mean to be mean about this.
No. I mean, this is, for a lot of us, this is what it used to mean to love reading. Like, we had one book that we were super into.
Right.
I mean, they're a lot younger.
Yeah.
Catherine's young.
Yeah.
The narrator, though, seems to think that this is a great gift that Radcliffe and others have presented with the world. Nonetheless, I mean, the novel likes those Gothic romances.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I think it also is making fun of them. Mm-hmm. And by extension, Catherine becomes a little bit the butt of the joke.
That's right.
And
including at Henry's hands.
Yeah, and I don't quite know what to do with this. I mean, this older man teasing the younger woman who he's preparing to marry is very Jane Austen-y.
Right.
And I don't object. I don't find that especially difficult or superficial or whatever. But I find that, like, for instance, I will say this: I was pretty into this book in Volume 1. Mm-hmm. I was pretty, curious to see what would happen. I thought it was very interesting that we were 100 and something pages in before we even encountered anything that explained what Northanger Abbey was.
That's right.
And then once we found out that it was the ancestral home of this man she's interested in, I thought, well, this is promising. But honestly, I thought the entire plot, once we get to Northanger, the entire plot is just flimsy.
Yeah.
And the reason I think it's flimsy, well, let me rephrase that. I think the reason it turned out to be flimsy was because Jane Austen was more concerned with this kind of satire of the Gothic than she was in Catherine Morland.
And maybe not just the Gothic, but also the Gothic fairy tale. I thought a lot about Bluebeard when I was reading this.
There's a lot of reference,
and you know, that core myth certainly predates Austen, like most of the core fairy tale myths do. And what was especially resonant with that was the, you know, when he yells at Eleanor for them even being in there.
Yeah.
And then it's like there's all these references to keys and locks, you know, which was the whole Bluebeard thing. It's like if they're running the place, but not in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, Catherine's like, this is where he must have put, because in Bluebeard, of course, it is where the dude puts his murdered wives.
Right.
And as long as you follow that rule, like the implication being every single one of them could have had the life, but curiosity got them because, you know, women, they can't, you know, they can't be told no. I mean, it feels like this really weird justification for domestic abuse in some ways.
Right.
But it was resonant with that, and you're right. I mean, there's satire, there's homage, but when a book does that, you're right. Its own gravity maybe gets sacrificed, and it becomes instead like wealthy more for its allusiveness, than for its own.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm feeling, and you know, I mean, I like a good Gothic story as much as anybody, I guess. But having gone through the oeuvre, I feel like I know what, you know, Austen is capable of here. And I don't know, maybe she just got a little bit bored with these kind of like detailed and moving depictions of the female world and wanted to try something different.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe I shouldn't be upset about that, but I just found myself like, I don't know, for instance, General Tilney, I think, is a very, very difficult character. You know, he is overly solicitous. Like I wrote down in the margins at one point, like, he keeps asking this 18-year-old, 17-year-old, what she thinks about architecture, what she thinks about interior design, what she thinks about China.
It's because he thinks she's loaded and he wants her to be impressed with him.
Right. And we figured that out, right? But
we didn't know at the time, and it was cringe.
Right. But he's also like very happy to kind of, you know, lose it over like the dinner time and force everybody to kind of like, you know, run around. And he's also, you know, plenty comfortable like hollering about what part of the rooms they can go in or when they can go outside with him and when they can't.
It's like, well, how would you describe his deal?
Well,
there's more to it than just wanting money. There's other personality problems. Like he has like some sort of, like our buddy often talks about characters being on the spectrum. He might be, in terms of his sense of what is proper and what's not. I don't mean that as a slur, of course.
Well,
it's
comes
just
out.
hard to understand. He's not operating according to the same understandings as other people, maybe.
Right. Well, he comes across as just basically very, very selfish.
Yeah.
Right. He comes across as this guy who kind of like wants to stage manage his whole life and you know, kind of loses his temper if he thinks that that's being challenged. And he's just
said 5 o'clock. You're supposed to be here at 5 o'clock.
Just a bad guy in that sense. Yeah. But because this is happening within this kind of, you know, structure of the satire and the, you know, and you know, Catherine finding the chest that turns out to just be like where the spare blankets are, and you know, that kind of thing. You know, because it's happening within that, it just feels so contrived, right? And then there ends up being sort of very little, you know, sort of explanation or even exploration of he doesn't really change his mind. He doesn't really sort of nothing.
His daughter marries somebody so wealthy, he's like, whatever.
Right. He finds out that Catherine's not as poor as he'd led led to believe. He's like, oh, sure. And I find this to be kind of like shockingly superficial in a Jane Austen story, where in the past, you know, she would have gone to considerable trouble to kind of parse out the kind of social, you know, there would have been this aunt who showed up who was like, General, how dare you, and would have set him straight. There would have been some kind of...
He would have been punished.
Right, there would have been some kind of something. that made it clear, what happened here.
Maybe she's going for a little more realism there.
Something, but all of the stuff that just kind of gets the balls that just get dropped, right? Like we know that Tilney's sister marries the Viscount.
Daughter.
Or daughter, yeah. No, well, yeah.
Young Eleanor.
Henry Tilney's sister,
yeah.
Marries the Viscount, and that's like the thing. But also like it literally just comes and goes.
Well, yeah, we had no inclination that she even had a boyfriend.
Right.
But then there's by the way, they've been together for a while.
Yeah.
And it's fine. She's
right.
She got
and she's
her
now
happiness.
a lady.
Yes.
Right. And then what's his name? Thorpe, just kind of vanishes.
Well, and even more to the point, Isabella and Frederick.
Just poof.
I mean, let me ask you about this. Like, so is the implication that Isabella and Frederick had sex after the Tilneys and Catherine left to go to Northanger, and then after Frederick got what he wanted, he split? But by then she had already lost Catherine's brother. Like, we have to fill in all these blanks, and I'm just kind of wondering how inappropriate was Isabella. Like, I don't really see a smoking gun here that makes her as evil as Catherine thinks she is, based on what I was given. Like, other than, okay, she flirted too much with another guy and it upset James, but like, I don't, like, I don't even know if we can believe that James, when he says in the letter, well, they're engaged. But it seems like neither Frederick or Isabella ever acknowledged that was the case. So, like, what even happened at Bath?
Right. I mean, I do want to say that I think it feels to me like Isabella is taking these liberties.
But just like by publicly flirting, or do you think she took other liberties?
I don't know that it matters. If you pin me down, I would probably say I don't think she slept with him.
Okay. Do you think they talked about getting married the way that James thinks they did?
I think it's very possible.
Okay.
Because I think look, Frederick is just awful.
He's the black sheep of the family,
right? And he's kind of paired in this. He's in this kind of orbit with the Thorpe brother, who is also awful, and he kind of represents this kind of social force. It's just this kind of, I guess in the language of D&D, right? It's this sort of chaotic evil.
And it's interesting that after all the nobility of the military and persuasion, that we go back to, I mean, now I know that general sometimes doesn't mean you were in the military; it can be a nobility, right. But the eldest son, Frederick, right. certainly is in the armed services.
He's in the Navy.
So this time, no heroic sailor, I guess, is a long way of saying that.
Right, and so I think
it's this time the pastor who really is the good guy.
Yeah.
It's like Edmund, in Mansfield Park was technically the good guy, but God, he was on my nerves.
Unbearable.
This guy, at least I like.
Yeah.
And in a lot of Austen novels, the pastor really is bad news.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Austen is sort of telegraphing, but not really fleshing out a lot of the things that would have been the story.
Yeah.
Because she's more interested in moving on to the satire of the Gothic. And I find myself, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Right. I would have liked to have seen a longer wrap-up that explained a little bit more about what happened between Isabella and Frederick. I certainly also would have liked to have seen Catherine and Henry ending up together, resolved in a way that didn't feel like, and again, it was meta. She's like, well, you guys are probably starting to notice we're almost out of pages. She actually says that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, damn, like, way to take all the, like, if I'm the sort of person that's going to feel satisfied by seeing them get together,
right?
This one doesn't really give you that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like how they went for a walk, the mother figured something was up, and by the time they got there, guess what? Something was up. And I'm like, well, that's not hot.
And
fun.
And the questions I'm left with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of course they get together.
Right.
But so there are these kind of giant ruptures, right? And the motives of these. So Henry rejects his father's values.
Yeah.
And you know, and
He's
is
in a big fight.
and is kind of exiled from the family.
Yeah.
For a little while there. And this would have been 20 pages of Emma.
Yeah.
Right, about, you know, well, and now what are we going to do? You know,
Yeah.
is love enough?
Right.
You know, kind of thing. Isabella is playing this really dangerous game in Bath, which is where one plays dangerous games. I know.
Evidently, according to Austin, it's kind of like the New Orleans of.
But to what end? What is she really trying to achieve here? Is she just caught up in this kind of, you know, it's easy to believe, right? That
I think she just likes men.
Young, she's getting attention.
Yeah.
She thinks that she can get away with this thing that she's maybe considering harmless.
She seemed genuinely expectant that Catherine would write her back. She seemed to think that letter was like, hey, we're still friends, right?
But it's also in the context of these really, like, this. Here's something I will say in the positive about this book. What's his name? The brother. Isabel's brother.
Isabel's brother, John Thorpe.
Yeah, John. So John is just such a just like psychopathic liar.
Right.
I mean, just you. I'm tempted to think that he doesn't even know he's lying.
He told Isabella that him and Catherine were going to get married.
Right.
Yeah.
And just had this whole fabric of everything. We see kind of similar stuff from Frederick, right? And so when Isabella writes this letter to Catherine, I see no reason to not think that she isn't doing the exact same thing as her brother would have done in this circumstance.
Right.
Just fabricate this wish fulfillment of
and
a
we
thing.
were suspicious of her in Volume 1.
Right.
Like, we knew that she wasn't really... Because it just seemed like anytime Catherine really needed her, Isabella was like, well, I got to do this other thing.
And so one of the things I think is really interesting in this book, I think it's the only example of a one, maybe two, maybe three characters who just like legitimately reject the civilized world and are just kind of like out there being the Joker, you know, and like, you know,
The
setting
life's
things
just for fun.
Yeah, just setting things on fire to see what will happen.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really interesting maneuver.
Isabella more than John, because John does seem genuinely motivated by wanting to get some money out of all of this.
Right.
With Isabella, it's like not even clear what the end game is other than to just have fun.
Well,
you know?
I mean, also, you know, it must be very difficult. I'm trying to think of the right way to frame this. I don't want to suggest that there's like a gender thing at play here exactly. But in a world where there are these kind of very restricted sort of opportunities, it must be a little bit like crack to have two men after you. I mean, you know, like so many of these Austen characters are just like, just please one man, even an old one.
And her mother, of course, is fully an enabler.
Right.
Like in both. Persuasion in this, at least, and it may be in other novels, one of the things about Bath is it's important that an older, more responsible woman be with them.
Right.
So that they can just, like, the parent can trust that, like, okay, I know why she's going to Bath.
Right.
And, like, I'm okay with it. But, like, a little bit of supervision, you know, let's not let them do what undergrads would do if they went to Daytona or New Orleans without their parents, right? But Isabella's mom is like, oh, well, you are always the kindest and the best and no thought for anybody. Like, she's just feeding her every flattery. So Isabella has been, and by extension her brother, you get the impression they've just been raised to be, you know, complete psychopaths that you're describing.
There's a sort of feral quality.
Yeah. Like, you're just our special babies, and
you know, you want that. Well, okay.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of imagine that kind of, you know, just expressing a desire for a thing kind of, you know, erases a lot of moral qualms. You know, in that case, and so you know, in a way, you know, what I was sort of imagining was that they were going to be the sort of actual Gothic element of this story. Was that they were the monsters.
And in a way, I suppose they are.
But the novel loses interest in them mostly, except as like
Henry's even picking on Catherine, and he's right. But he's like, you're not even going to be thinking about Isabella in like a few weeks. It's how insignificant she was. Again, kind of a meta dismissal of a character who had aroused. Like Mary Crawford and Henry Crawford in Mansfield Park, they were the real heat of the novel. And these are like shadows of that, I would say.
Yeah, and so, I think there were these opportunities and some interesting questions, I kept waiting. I don't know exactly what I wanted, but I kept waiting for something that just felt kind of more like that ending in Persuasion, or that ending in Mansfield Park, where kind of like real life seemed to be happening.
I guess if it was our area, we knew more about early 19th century British society and history, we would probably feel more strongly favorably about the book, in as much as it seems to me like all the things we're talking about, the heavy allusiveness, the satire, and the hat tipping. I mean, I would imagine that to Austen scholars and to scholars that are romanticists, right, in general, this is an important work of British literary history, in as much as it's like, here's one great author acknowledging, the potential of the novel, a great novelist acknowledging the potential of the novel, and like reminding her readers in her own moment, everybody's digging this stuff. Like, it becomes a marker. If you were a new historicist who focused on Jane Austen, I bet this is like really fertile ground in a way that it's a little less for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been like fairly negative about this.
Yeah. And the criticism I'm looking forward to reading, because some of it might clue us into some of that. Yeah,
maybe so. But yeah, I ultimately found myself unable to kind of invest in the way that...
Not really invested either. No, I mean, and even, the characters, there's just being a shallowness in characters that go away. I mean, even James, I just had to take for granted that James was a good guy. It is Catherine's brother. And the only reason I was even passably able to do that is the few scenes he was in, he was, after all, nice. Then plus, her parents are nice, so you figure, well, he's, okay, they've all been raised to be nice. Yeah. But as far as James getting done wrong by Isabella, like, man, I didn't really have that much more investment in James than I did in Frederick, really. It's like, well, other than because I care about Catherine, what do I care who Isabella hooks up with?
Yeah, it sort of seemed like almost all of that stuff was just kind of like contingencies aimed at creating the possibilities to like, talk about Radcliffe or whatever.
But it also made me wonder if there isn't something going on once again with female friendship, because part one definitely set you up to believe, okay, female friendship is a theme, because here's Catherine and Isabella together all the time.
Yeah.
Their lives are intersecting. They're meeting each other's brothers. There's sexual tension. One group, two of them might get married.
Yeah.
Like, all of that is interesting, right, to Austen. But in volume 2, the real female friendship of the novel, and I mean, even the cover, we talked about the Picasso painting, it's of two women reading together.
Yeah.
Is not the great friendship of the novel Eleanor and Catherine, like, as women friendship? I mean, it feels like we got some real time with them, and they're like, oh yeah, when Henry went away, they thought it would suck, but turned out they had the house to themselves, and they were truly digging it,
Right, but what were they doing? Like, it never actually we never actually
And we don't
see
get a
them.
montage
Yeah,
of them,
we,
you know.
yeah, we they didn't go to the mall. They
No,
didn't,
no, it's yes.
they
Yeah,
didn't rewatch Heathers.
We could have used that. Some
you know,
of that.
And so in
Not
a way,
even a pillow fight.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it to the camera.
Yeah.
Not even a pillow fight. They're alone in the house.
So I found myself feeling like, in a way, I wasn't surprised at all that this kind of like non-character comes in and marries Eleanor, because in some ways she's also a non-character.
But what is it about the relationship that Austen might say, okay, that's real female friendship, that's positive? Is it just because she's there and she's not horrible?
I was left with the impression that really this friendship with Eleanor was really just a kind of boondoggle that I mean, they're friendly enough and they get along fine, but that it was really just a boondoggle to get Catherine to the Abbey so that Henry's dad can like seal the deal,
Okay, that makes sense. Well, in that sense, then what you've got is each volume giving a lot of space to two women being together, but then not paying off, if you're right. And I think you're right, though, like in the end, it's like, wow, you really could be talking about female friendship, but if so,
where is
I'm not sure that it's there. Yeah.
And in a way, right, Catherine's relationships are actually much more meaningful with like the actual spaces. I mean, that pump house got a ton of love, right? And then
anybody that's ever been on vacation understands that. It's like there's certain places where that's the centerpiece of your
right. And then the Abbey, I mean, these just loving, descriptions of hallways
and gardens
There's a great line about like taking her alone into the shrubberies at one point. That I just thought was, unintentionally hilarious. But so this sort of placeness of it seems really. But unlike Mansfield Park, the actual placeness didn't end up being as important, right?
And unlike Emma, the grandeur of Knightley's property is such that we're left in awe. And then we also find ourselves admiring him more because she's going to move in with him as annoying dad, even though he commands this, like, what Austen thinks of as the crown jewel of what a responsible...
Right.
But, like, for all its greatness, Northanger Abbey is not accounted that same...
Right.
Like, we're not promised at all that one day Catherine's going to be ruling Northanger Abbey. It may be that they just stay in freaking Fullerton.
But then I guess back to my point, this property that Henry has, this Woodston property, the old parsonage.
The cottage.
Right. She almost comes to see it, or maybe in fact comes to see it as better than the Abbey.
Well, she says, I could look out this window for the rest of my life, and that's what she's going to get.
Right.
So I hope she likes the view as much in 20 years as she did when she was 18.
And, one of the things I was hoping was going to develop there was something like, this maneuver where it's like, oh, she's putting aside this kind of childish interest in the Gothic. She's thinking about, investing in a real place and a real relationship, and not these kind of like summer camp relationships that she's had with Eleanor or Isabella. But then
she's going to take on the responsibilities of ministering to the Christian, the churchgoers who depend on Henry for guidance. And she's going to have a role to play there now,
and she's going to improve the land. I'm not actually sure that Henry is preaching.
Well, he's got to be there on Sundays for some reason, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, I thought that these were old Catholic properties.
Okay.
That there's that mention of the Reformation. Early in volume.
So you think he might not be the title, like a
parson or
you think he might not
what's
be
the word, a vicar?
Vicar, yeah.
I don't think so. I think that's just like property his family owns that he is like marked as his, as opposed to the Abbey, which is his father's.
Okay. I guess I just totally misunderstood that.
Well,
that's interesting.
Well, I mean the Abbey. Also,
I think like the Spark Notes describes, because I was it's been like a month since we read Volume 1, so I went to Spark Notes and I was like, I got to refresh myself on the characters, and they called him a pastor, but I don't know.
It could be.
But I don't know that we ever did see reference to him actually preaching.
He did
have to go back sometimes.
I thought he was going to like manage the property.
Yeah.
I think he was making improvements, what's his name in Mansfield, right? Who's
Edmund.
Who's like, getting the pasture just right and getting
Right.
the orchard just right and the
Right.
walls, and so maybe I'm not getting that part correct, but
Either way, there's not a lot of emphasis on it.
Either way, right? Basically, as soon as things seem to be resolved with the father, which in my mind are not really resolved. I mean, I'm not left with the sense that the book ends on page like 174. I'm not convinced that on page 180, he's not just going to be like, nope, I changed my mind, I hate you again.
Yeah.
And so. So that absence of
but
real resolution.
Part of this too might be one of those things where Frederick is such a faithless jerk that even the father doesn't like him. Father rolls his eyes about Frederick never being on time anywhere or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be, if we wanted to put a positive spin on it, that he's like, listen, Henry's like the son that actually cares about the family legacy, and I probably don't want to disown him. Like, and then they're going to give me grandchildren. I can imagine a face turn for the general,
sure.
In later years, but I have to imagine it.
But we have to imagine it sort of out of nowhere.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing, in that sense. And so in the end, I feel like instead of what I thought of as this kind of signature Jane Austen move where everything comes together, but within this kind of realistic social milieu, I feel like this just kind of comes together out of nowhere with nothing to really hold it together by the time we're done.
What did you think about, and again, when we read, I think it's the Hopkins article again, the editor drawing so much attention to like those pamphlets, and it's like, this guy is suppressing dissent. This guy is one of the ministers. I don't know I don't know my British literary history that well, but I do remember my William Blake and how Blake had to do, and this is earlier than 1810. So, but I mean, he had to do, didn't he? Like all his art, all his visual art and poems in code.
Yeah.
Like the strong, like you could go to get in a lot of trouble for criticizing the government at the time that Austen was writing.
Yeah, I was intrigued with that. I wrote that down in my notes. It's 129.
Yeah. Hopkins, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's read that for people.
But he says when they're going to bed, right? Yeah. And he says.
It's like
I've lost the line, but
I'll help you find it here. Correspondence. Okay, it's in the middle. I have many, like in the middle of this second paragraph here. After an evening.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, many pamphlets to finish. He said to Catherine before I can close my eyes, perhaps maybe poring over the affairs of the nation for hours after you are asleep. Can any of us be more meetly employed? My eyes will be blinding for the good of others, and yours preparing by rest for further mischief.
Right. And then we get the footnote.
Right. But this idea, right, that the general is somehow sacrificing his well-being for the good of the country, while Catherine, by just going to bed, is somehow preparing for further mischief.
That spoken like a true censor.
Well, and
you know what I mean? I mean, you see here at the bottom of 129,
right.
Noting the passage of the Anti-Treason and Seditious Meeting Acts in 1795, right. Along with the role of citizens in screening publications beginning in 1792, Hopkins identifies Tilney as a volunteer in the government's campaign. Mm-hmm. Throughout this decade to express dissent. And then wasn't there there was a reference to spies everywhere?
Yeah.
Where was that? You know what I'm talking about?
I do, but I didn't write down in my
England
notes.
Is a country of.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on page 136. What about this? This is Henry. Dear Miss Moreland, consider the dreadful nature of the suspicions you have entertained, because you think my dad killed my mom,
or is like somehow keeping her prisoner or something.
What have you been judging from? Remember the country and the age in which we live. Remember that we are English and that we are Christians. Consult your own understanding, your own sense of the probable, your own observation of what is passing around you. Does our education prepare us for such atrocities? Do our laws connive at them? Could they be perpetuated without being known in a country like this, where social and literary intercourse is on such a footing, where every man is surrounded by a neighborhood of voluntary spies? Wow, that feels fresh and modern in the digital age, and phones, and like everybody's recording everyone and firing everyone and yelling at everyone. And it's like, it's also Henry kind of standing up for the Enlightenment here against Goth, right? He's like, you can't get away with that stuff in enlightened England.
Right.
Like, we've moved on to the age of reason now.
Right.
Like, people don't kill their wives or keep them in basements anymore, you know?
Right, except his father is a Gothic monster.
Right.
Just not exactly that kind. You know?
And the spies themselves are Gothic monsters, though. That's monstrous.
Yeah, well, I think your call about these sort of current events here is right on, but I found myself thinking of the Stasi, even more, and this kind of like this kind of structure of like snitching on your neighbors, of gleefully snitching on your neighbors that came out of that. I think that.
For the good of the country.
I don't know.
The good of the country is the way the Stasi put it.
I don't know enough about this moment in English history. I'm assuming the Hopkins essay will fix that somewhat. Yeah. But it is this kind of interesting. I've been thinking a lot about Dracula lately. I've discovered you might like this. There was this Icelandic guy who was a big fan of Stoker's writing, and he was just like corresponding with him back in what I forget 1850, whenever 1880, whenever he was writing Dracula.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this just sounds fascinating, And Stoker was like, well, here, I'll send you an early draft of the novel, and just mailed it to him. And this guy like translated it into Icelandic, but he wasn't a professional. He didn't understand or didn't care or something that like translations are supposed to be like true to the original. So he rewrote.
It's a different story.
Well, it's still Dracula, but he adjusted things, and by some accounts, it's a much tighter, much stronger novel than Stoker's.
That is interesting.
But nobody really knew about it outside of Iceland until fairly recently, and now there's an English translation of the Icelandic version, and it's called like The Power of Shadows or something like that. And so my point that I'm getting to very slowly here is that there is this kind of very modern thing happening in the mid to late 1800s, the same way that there's this very modern thing happening in the Regency period here, where all these new possibilities are happening, right? Like it's stuff like the phonograph in the late 1800s. It's stuff like the print industry and Regency stuff. But there's like this kind of moment where everyone goes, science.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's in the nature of Gothic storytelling to show us how those things get corrupted and how
they cover up a thing that you thought
right.
You thought that some of that stuff had been replaced by the shiny new thing, but all the shiny new thing did was cover it.
And not well enough.
Right.
As you know, I'm also watching Stranger Things for the first time.
Yeah, okay.
And there's a lot of stuff happening in that kind of.
Well, the '80s is ground zero for like postmodern goth.
Right.
In some ways,
and part of it
everything like the REM song, "Shiny Happy People."
Well, and part of it is we're at this other moment where people are like, "And technology is now going to save our lives. We're now modern."
Yeah.
Right? It feels like what we're seeing are these kind of steps along this process of human understanding where someone like ruins it by going, and now we're modern, and then the monsters find a new way to monster.
Yeah.
And one of the things that this hints at is that General Tilney is one of those monsters figuring out how this moment allows him to be Bluebeard without being Bluebeard.
And Henry's naivety inciting the very conditions that, as you're pointing out, that his father is taking advantage of.
Yeah.
He's citing those as evidence that we can't be Gothic.
Right.
Maybe doesn't spell the best future for Catherine either.
Right.
I mean, in as much as like, wow, you're kind of clueless, kid. You're 26 and you think that England's all that.
Right. Fair enough, right, that he gets it wrong. I mean, A bunch of
We
people,
all do.
A bunch of people have to get it wrong all the time.
I know.
But
it's that assurance that gets you in trouble with a heavy hitter writer like Austen. Right. I think there's a difference between being wrong and being so sure that you're right. That Austen thinks that's a meaningful difference.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and I think ultimately, and this may be kind of my closing argument, right? Yeah. Ultimately, I feel like Austen is performing a little touch of the same sort of thing. I think the overall kind of schema of this book makes me kind of hear her voice in my head saying, like, what you really want is this kind of romp through the conventions of Gothic that continues to be frustrated. That this Gothic story keeps turning back into a romance. Without the Gothic features, and that's going to be funny and interesting to you. When in fact, what I'm really interested in is something that's probably much more like just this historical moment that would turn into a monograph about surveillance in the Gothic. And so I think she's made the wrong bet in this book in a way that I find troubling, because I wouldn't have said 6 weeks ago that she was capable of making this kind of misstep.
And it might be, to your earlier point, and I mean, I know that the chronology's fuzzy because I guess she started this book first, but it was still published posthumously. Something.
That she hadn't quite finished it, right?
So no matter how you slice it, this is a departure from the other 5 books, which are more, I'm not saying they're all the same. We've talked about differences among them.
Sure.
But this is a very, like you said, like this is her trying something else. Mm-hmm. And so if that's where you're going to flop a little bit, it's when you do that, right? Like to the extent that it didn't stick the landing, this would be the one to not do it.
And I might feel very differently about this if she had written 5 more, 6 more books, and did different things and developed this into whatever. I could imagine a moment where Jane Austen doesn't get sick, and she has 20 more years or whatever.
Pumps out another 6 books,
right,
7 books.
Right, and we see her sort of like dial this in, or we see her move on, or whatever. And this could be.
She died so young, right? Like in her early 30s.
Yeah. So I think part of what's happening here is I'm giving this extra weight because it is the last book, and that's not fair of me, right? Like she didn't exactly know it was the last book.
It's kind of like the curse of being canon.
Yeah.
Like we often talk about, the canon's dead because of diversity or because of too many professors or, all that's kind of true. But there's also like heavier expectations on somebody like Jane Austen, from the reader. Mm-hmm. That isn't always so great for the book.
Right.
It's, it's not like you're just going to kick it by the fire and read it and be like, that was great. It's like, you expect it to be great, because it's the great Jane Austen who to this day, whole society's named for her. Mm-hmm. Faculty, endowed chairs whose specialty is this. Jane Austen's novels has spawned, such incredible criticism on fashion in English history and architecture in English history and gender discussions, of course, feminism, and so the expectations for her kind of through the roof. And when you find yourself being like, man, I didn't really love that book, it can make you feel bad about yourself too.
Right.
Like, what did I miss? You know.
Right. So.
But I did like it overall. Yeah. Hey, you know what? Like I've read a lot worse books than freaking Northanger Abbey. I'll put it that way.
Right. Yeah. Happy to have read it.
Yeah. And I look forward to the criticism.
Yeah. With that.
And we'll see you one more time in the Jane Austen sequence with a discussion of criticism within the Northanger Abbey.